All right, the date is February 25th, 2025, and the time is 18:03 hours. And I'd like to call the Frederick County School Board meeting to order. We have an agenda before us. Do I have a motion for approval?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion, and it has been properly seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. Up next is the fiscal year 26 budget. And Dr. Hummer, I'm going to pass this over to you, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, School Board. I'm going to go down to the podium if that's okay, and then we can go ahead and work through the budget presentation. So just give me a second.
It's easier for us to throw stuff at you.
There we go. That's what I'm hoping for.
Got the mints.
Nina, this isn't on. Our screen.
It's not.
I just hit all the buttons. I don't know what I'm doing.
Drive on, sir.
Fixed? Okay. Fantastic. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to see you all. Happy to report out where we are currently with the budget, with the expectation with you all adopting the budget this evening, so we can hopefully send that downtown so they can start working through the next stages of the whole budget for the county. So we're going to start off with an update to where we are with the budget timeline, and then we're going to dive into, at two parts of this presentation, of the additional requests that we've received from you all in regards to some additional changes, additions, considerations in regards to the FY26 budget before we send it downtown. And then we will talk about a summary of all of that and get a consensus before you all then vote on the budget that will be, again, sent downtown. So as I mentioned to you all, the budget is a very, very thorough and long process that we value very greatly as we get feedback and input from numerous stakeholders, principals, teachers, you all, our staff, parents, in regards to building out what's called a needs-based budget. I then provide that needs-based budget presentation to you all, and before we provide that needs-based budget presentation to you, there are conversations with downtown, as well as we look at money that we feel that we are going to get from the state, so that we are able to put together not only a needs-based budget, but a budget that we know that we are going to be able to afford as a school division and as a county. So that presentation was presented to you all in January. We then had some finance committee meetings throughout the course of January and February, and then we held a work session with the Board of Supervisors, which I thought was very productive. We got some feedback, answered those questions, which you all should have received. And then, of course, if there's any other additional questions that are coming forward, more than happy to answer those. We then had to pivot because of the lovely Mother Nature with all the snow that they gave us, and we had to shift our budget work session as a school board to February 18th, right before our school board meeting last week. And then we'll dive into the additional recommendations that you all had recommended for us to take into consideration, which we have the information to share with you all this evening. After you all adopt the budget, hopefully this evening, that will then get sent downtown. We will then be having more conversations with the county and the Board of Supervisors. I will then go downtown and present another presentation to them. You all are invited. Please, I hope you all can make it. And then the Board of Supervisors will approve the budget in April. Before you all approve the budget, after it comes back to you, you all can still make additional changes and adjustments, especially if the Board of Supervisors sends back to us a less dollar figure than we initially anticipated. And we can talk through adjustments and changes at that time as well. So after you all adopt it today, that doesn't mean that when it comes back to you in April, that you still cannot make those changes. You just can't go greater than what they appropriated for us. We can move things around, but we can't go greater. So throughout our conversations, we have had numerous items that we're thankful for you all to add those items on, as well as some additional information that you wanted us to take into consideration to be adjusted within this budget, which we are prepared to present to you this evening. But those 5 items were as follows. First is to talk through the different pay scales for our teachers, which we will discuss those items here in a second. We also, which again, we thank you for increasing the 2 additional buses in the operating budget to 4. So that'll get us to that magic number of 13. So if we do get those 2 additional, you will not see that as an additional request next year. As well as taking a look at that technology budget, which we're able to reduce some dollars there. The 2 new items that came up last Tuesday, that again, we are prepared to discuss in further detail today, is our CEP program, which is the feeding of students that qualify in schools that qualify, which we'll talk more about that here in a second, as well as our preschool program. And we are going to break that down for you all and then answer any questions that you have. So those were the 5. If there's additional items, hopefully you all have, we'll be able to talk through those, but hopefully this was it for today so we can continue to move this budget process forward. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and break down the budget just one more time, and then we'll go ahead and dive into those items. I want to pause. Was there any questions? Good. Okay. All right. So first,
Actually, I have one.
Oh, yes, sir.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude when I say this, but is it necessary to go through the entire budget again when we already know what it is and not just deal with the 5 items that are on the agenda?
It's valid.
So I work at the will of the board. I want to make sure everybody is fully informed, but I can just go to the 5 items that you all want to see changed if you guys want to do that.
Because, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Hummer, the budget has been published, it's out.
Yep.
That anyone can see it in the community. And you've been doing these special guest shots at different high schools and schools.
Sure.
So if anyone really wants to know about it, they can go to those or look on our line.
Totally up to you guys.
So that's my suggestion, take it or leave it. Love it.
Love it.
Sounds good. We'll do that. Thank you. Appreciate that. I never turn down an opportunity to share our budget, but for time's sake, I'm more than happy to jump right to the items that are up for discussion. So we'll talk with the first item, which is to take a look at the pay scales. So when I initially made the needs-based budget presentation, it started at a 4.9% increase for teachers. And again, in order to decluster our pay scales, it is going to take about 3 to 4 years. So we're at the second year of that. So that is why we started at that 4.9 with the initial budget proposal. Thanks to you all who asked us to take a look at, can we add on some additional pay scales so that we can accelerate that? And we're all in favor of that if we can fix those pay scales a little bit quicker. So now where we're at is column A, or pay scale A option, was my initial budget proposal. So that was the 4.9% increase. E was what was asked about Mr. Atkins, and we all agreed that we would take a look at what that dollar figure would look like to break apart the 3 to 6 years. And then F is going to look at both of those. So for this budget proposal, 5.6 is just looking at column E. If you wanted us to look at both, sorry, going the wrong way, E and F, that would be scale F because that's in combining A and E. That will be an additional $866,000. So let's refresh. My initial proposal was 4.9. The proposal after the Finance Committee meeting a couple weeks ago was 5.6. With the new request of looking at A and E for scale F would be a 6.4% increase. Questions, thoughts?
So the only one that's not broken out is the 16-year cluster. Is that correct? By itself?
For E, correct.
Yeah. For E, it's just what?
For E was when we broke up the 3 through 6 and we left the 14 and the 15 and 16, as you can see the difference
Yeah,
between the
so,
two there.
but you don't have anything up here that just shows the 15 and 16.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
So we have to vote on this? What do we have to do with it?
So what we have to do is we're answering questions. Again, my initial proposal, which is still the motion on the table, which is to move forward with my initial needs-based budget proposal, but with the additional additions on here, you all will have to decide for this aspect, continue with the 4.9, go with E, or go with F, which combines A and E. And you all will have to decide what that budget proposal looks like.
A is 4.9?
Correct.
And that doesn't break up any of the clusters, does it?
Yeah, so for
A
the
does,
4.9, so each one of these breaks up a cluster.
Okay.
It just depends on where it's at.
Correct.
The first one that Dr. Homer proposed was the one that broke it up at, I believe it's year 16, broke out
15
here.
to 16, okay.
Yeah, and then
That's
the
your
one,
initial.
and
Correct.
then
Gotcha.
the one I proposed was breaking it up at 5 and 6 down there. I believe is right. Yeah, and
Yes,
then
letter E, yep.
and then we talked about last time what it would look like if we did both at the same time, because the last thing we want to do is say that we're favoring one group versus the other, because that's just not the case. It's where are we seeing the need at right now in real time versus where we're seeing it at other times. And I know when we look at some of our personnel action items during closed session where we're losing people at.
Correct.
Not saying, that we're not losing people everywhere, but we're seeing the biggest spike right there. And like I talked about last time, those people are having the most trouble making ends meet because they're at that lower pay scale. But, next year we could come back up and hit that 16. I think both areas are vital to making FCPS run correctly. It just depends on which year we want to do this, is all it really comes down to. I'm good with anything. I know it was my suggestion, on putting E. I've talked with some of the teachers out there, and, some of them are like, yeah, I totally understand that. Some of them are pretty adamant about like the commercial, the J.G. Wentworth, I want my money and I want it now kind of stuff. But, yeah, so I just kind of wanted to look at that. And I know that during the last meeting we brought up, hey, what would it look like if we did both? I think doing both, that's kind of tough right now as far as making that adjustment, especially when we're talking about other proposed cuts on this budget cycle. So, we can't be, we got to be kind of responsible with these dollars.
So I hear what you're saying, and I think that what we need to consider is that we increased the starting pay last budget, and we're looking to increase it again this budget. But what we haven't done is to promote the teachers and staff that have been in our district and in our county for a number of years, that loyalty. And I fear that those that are here for 15, 16 years may see this as a slap in the face. And I'm not saying all of them. I've heard from a few. And my decision was made up before they even reached out to me. But as a teacher who's been in the business for 30 years, I know that the midway point is about the time you're thinking, do I continue and retire from this, or do I go and look for a new career? And I think losing this institutional knowledge of having these quality teachers here is far greater than attracting new talent. Now, I just attended a personnel committee meeting, pre-meeting, and I've heard some pretty good things. We'll share at the personnel committee next week, I guess. But I would be remiss if we didn't truly think about those teachers who have shown their loyalty to our school, especially now, and keeping them in our school. So I would vote for letter A.
Me too.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can make a recommendation, because we do have 5 to go through. If you all do not have a consensus of which one to go through, we can go through each 5 items, and then we can loop back around, and then you guys can vote on which items you want to move forward with, and then go ahead and adopt the budget at the end, or we can go through each one individually. But my
Drive on.
recommendation would be to get through all of them.
Drive on.
Yep,
So go through all of them first and
Correct.
then come back and vote?
correct, correct.
Okey-doke.
Is that good?
My apologies.
No, it's good. It's good conversation. Mr. Bell. Okay, so I will fast forward here.
You touched the
So we're going to go a little out of order just because of instructional initiative, and I'm now going to shift down a couple bullets to preschool. At the last meeting, there was a request to take a look at preschool, how we are funding preschool, and potentially cut out some of our preschool services. So I just want to start from the beginning in regards to how Frederick County Public Schools services our early childhood population, as well as a county, how we service our students, and then kind of talk through the needs and then what that potentially look like moving forward. So we have three different ways that Frederick County can service students with early childhood services. One of those is what's called Virginia Preschool Initiative. And Virginia Preschool Initiative is a program that is funded through the state, and it is a income-based program for students in need. So we currently have 327 slots for students to participate in this program. The next and I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. I'm just going to go over the surface here. The next program is our Head Start program. Our Head Start program is not anything that is directly associated with FCPS. Those programs are funded through federal dollars. Some school divisions do harbor those programs within their school division, and they receive those direct federal dollars, but we do not. We currently, Frederick County, not Frederick County Public Schools, but Frederick County uses People, Inc., and they currently house those students. There is a waiting list for students to get into that program, and that is also income-driven as well. The next program is Early Childhood Special Education, and that is a program that is required, and that is for students who are ages 2 to 5 that qualify for a disability under IDEA. We currently house those students mostly at NREP. We do have some of those students in our VPI program classes, which I'll get to in a second, but a majority of them are at NREP. And they receive a multitude of services. And again, those are the services that we are required to provide. We get a majority of those funds from the locality. We also receive funds from the state and a small little portion from the federal government as well. So let's break that down a little bit more. So for our VPI program, those programs are currently housed within our schools. We have 4 schools that house our preschool programs. We have Stonewall, Apple Pie Ridge, Evendale, and Gainsborough. In each of those schools, we have 18 students. We have 1 teacher and 1 aide, and they provide services to those students. And currently, we have 72 students. As I mentioned, we have 327 slots. We have roughly about 40 to 41 students who are on a waiting list. And right now, the majority of those students are students who come from income-driven, economically disadvantaged families. But we also have a small portion of students with disabilities to give them a collaborative environment. These are students that are high-functioning, that do not need a self-contained setting. So this is the program where these students do benefit from engaging in typical developing peers.
Dr. Hummer, quick
Yes,
question.
absolutely.
Can you give us a day in the life of a VPI student? So for example, give us an example if you can.
Sure.
Keeping within confidentiality. What does their home life look like? What do their parents, are their parents incarcerated? Are their parents non-existent? Are these coming from foster homes? Are they DSS referees? What do these students look like?
Across the board.
Across the
So
board.
across the board. So
Okay.
I
All of
can't
the above.
speak. Yeah.
I'm seeing nods in the
Yeah,
back from
yes.
people who I know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes. So these are going to be our neediest population of students. Yes, ma'am.
So this neediest population of students probably don't have parents in the picture to have an income evaluation done on them, most likely. Right?
Some of the
Maybe.
parents are involved. They just have
Okay.
a circumstance that's working against them. I want to be very careful to say that these parents don't care about their kids or not involved, because some of them might, but also some of them might not have the skills to do that. So that's why we work with our families and our students to make sure that we are providing that educational experience so that they're able to transition to kindergarten, because we're going to have these students for 20 years. So I just want to be very careful to say that all of these parents don't have those skills, but I would say that some of those parents do have challenges that they're working up against. So yes, for some of them.
May
Yes, ma'am.
may I ask a question?
Yes.
When we toured that school last year and we went into that one room.
Yes.
Those were all VPI students,
Correct.
correct?
That's correct.
That's what I thought.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And I got to tell you, it broke my heart. But
Yeah.
I see the necessity of it.
So a little bit more. I think one other area that parents can access early childhood services that I did leave off because we don't have any direct impact on this is there is private preschool that some parents can access. Some of these preschools are very expensive, and there's also a waiting list for those programs that we are aware of. So for our students who come from homes that are impacted by income, they're not going to be able to afford those programs, and a lot of times these students definitely have unique needs as well. So currently, of these 72 students, we receive about $427,000 from the state, and we have a local match of $303,000 right now. These programs provide a multitude of services for students to access kindergarten when they get and they're age ready. So it provides them with long-term benefits, it provides them with a quality learning environment, and it provides them the structures they need in order to transition successfully to kindergarten and beyond. And there have been a multitude of research papers that have been shared with me, and there's been a multitude of different facts and information that has been shared, and I greatly appreciate that, and I always encourage those conversations. But if you look really deep at each of those research projects, and if you look very deep at the fine print, and typically it's in the last paragraph, it says that a lot of times a preschool program is based on the structures of that program. So if you have any sort of instructional program that is not monitored, which our program is, and we receive very high scores for, if we just place the students in there and treat it like a daycare and don't provide them with instructional goals to reach, socialization, emotional, then yes, it is going to be unsuccessful. Additionally, it's also not fair to compare a student who comes from a family who has economically disadvantaged needs and compare them to a typical developing peer. The purpose of a preschool program is to help provide them the supports so they're able to transition successfully to a K-12 school. It's not to get them equal to a typical developing peer because they have everything else working against them. Now, can we say that not every student will be able to reach that point? They might be able to. But based on our data and based on our research, students who are economically disadvantaged have always something working against them, and they have numerous obstacles to overcome. So if we remove this preschool program for them, we are going to be removing one more thing and adding one more obstacle for our students in order to access that education. Are there other students that we can add on to this program? Absolutely. If we do want to take a look at tapping into potentially the programs that parents can't afford preschool programs, we can talk through that. One of the issues that are working against us is space, so we would have to work through those pieces. But for the time being, and as you can see, we have 72 students. We definitely have a need for more, and we're not asking to grow it. We are just asking to keep this particular program and moving forward, and then potentially looking at other areas to expand in the future for other families and opportunities. Let me just dive into early childhood special education, but also to be very, very clear, as I mentioned to you earlier, VPI, even though it is beneficial and we support this program, it is not a required program. I want to be very, very clear, open and upfront and transparent about that. Head Start, also not required. That's funds that they get from the federal government. For ECSC, however, and I'll show you here, that is where a large portion of our money goes for our students in early childhood. That is required. That we are required to not only find and determine if students qualify for services from ages 2 to 5, but we're also required to provide those student services, which right now they're being serviced at NREP. One of the things that I was talking to my team about, and we could look into this, which would save the county money, is, as you can see, we have 327 slots that are allocated for Frederick County Public Schools based on our population. We could take some of those VPI slots and apply them to the early childhood special education slots so that we can reduce that local dollar figure and we can reduce that down. And that's something that we're currently working on. So if that is something that we need to reduce some of that cost, that's something that we can do. So it's something we're currently looking into.
How soon
How,
can we do it?
yeah.
Well, it's, I mean,
I have the number,
okay,
about 315,000.
Is what we would save?
Okay.
so there we go.
There
Thank
we
you.
How soon could we implement that?
Starting with the next school year.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Gotcha.
So we can bring that 2.9 down 300,000.
So question then.
There it is.
So what does that do to the other preschool that we have with those slots that are now taken away?
Well,
Keeps it the
in
same.
an ideal world, Mr. Bell, I would like to fill all 327, but right now we only have 41.
I
So-
understand.
So we're only going to take some of those slots. We're still going to keep the 72. And then if we, in the future, not next year, but hopefully in the future, if we can find space for those 41 with conversations with you all, but it's not going to impact those students.
And so how many of those 327 slots are you taking?
We got that.
Just one? Okay. Perfect.
Oh, goodness.
125.
So 125 slots, so you're still looking at a decent number of slots
Correct.
over the number of students that we're currently servicing.
Correct.
And
Correct.
it's not going to impact the ones that are currently in.
And it's not going to
VPI.
impact the ones
That
that
is
are
correct. Yes.
there. Okey dokey.
Great,
Oh, sounds like a good win.
done. Moving on.
Okay. Any other questions?
I've got
Yeah,
a couple.
please.
You know, I've had a lot of people reach out about this, and as they should, and I appreciate everybody that has reached out. I've seen different studies, you know, this way, that way, positive, negative. But one of the things I kept seeing on here was the fade out, right? And I know I shared one of my emails
Yeah.
with you.
Yes, sir.
How significant are we seeing that within our own school system? I'd love to have be able to track our kids throughout the school system and see exactly what's going on with that, so we can make better informed decisions. But from what I've been reading in all these VP, or well, I guess it'd just be pre-K programs across the nation, is you run into those students who go through the pre-K. By the time they hit third grade, everybody's kind of on par, and it didn't matter, is what it sounded like. Where it does matter in a lot of situations is, I think we have one thing that does go really well for us is it is ran pretty well around here. But the other thing is, these studies I'm looking at are, if it's pre-K across the board, you see a significant amount of college-ready students at graduation because they have started earlier.
Yep.
And I agree with you, Mr. Bell. I don't think that if we're into this, we should just be halfway in. Nobody can swim with one toe in the water, and that's what we do right now. So we've got a lot of stuff coming down the road that is a result of this pre-K program, such as the other building that's on the CIP. So it would be hard to ask the community to put up money for a building when we don't know the future of this program. Like, does it stay status quo of what we've got right now and we only service some students, or do we expand it to all students, or give all students the opportunity to go to pre-K if they so choose here at Frederick County Public Schools, build the appropriate size building for it, and let them hit the ground running on that, because that would give us both those situations where we could avoid the fade out. I'm torn on it, because I don't want to keep putting money into something that burns out by the time the students are in third grade. That's my heartburn with it. Do I see great potential and a lot that's going on with our pre-K? Yeah, I do. But if we're going to do it, I'm sorry, but we can't half-ass it. We've got to be in there all the way if we're going to do it.
Mr. Chair.
Ma'am.
So I have a little bit different take than Mr. Atkins does. So was very pleasantly surprised to receive a lot of emails and conversations getting pulled aside in public to talk about VPI, because it is such a small group, and it's such a small group of students, but clearly they have made their impact in this community. And I've heard it from liberals, I've heard it from conservatives, I've heard it from everyone across the political spectrum of how important this program is. I even had a very, very dear mentor and friend of mine from my childhood reach out to me, whose wife was a kindergarten teacher, and she taught in Clark County. And they have a similar program in Clark County, run slightly differently, which we have
We
discussed.
Talk through that, yeah.
There's some potential synergies there, another topic for another
Potentially,
meeting.
yep.
But he reached out to me, and then she did as well, and said that this program not only had impacted a member of their family, one of their grandchildren, but also the children that she taught before she retired approximately 20 years ago. So I just want to articulate this a little bit better for people, because I don't think this has been articulated well. And Dr. Hummer, it's not your fault. It's just a matter of what you can say and what you can't say. So fortunately, we can say some things from this dais, so I'm going to. So this program, we have the different programs. We have Head Start, which a lot of people think, okay, everyone's going to fall under the Head Start bucket. We've got all the privatized, we have all the privatized pre-K, and all of those people are 100% correct. Yes, we do. This is unique because this serves kids from parents who are in jail, parents who have addictions, parents who are not in the picture, and these students are in foster care and under DSS provisions. I did not know all that until I brought this up to the limelight last Tuesday. So thank you to all of you. As I always say from this dais, I'm not always going to agree with your viewpoints. Everyone thinks if they reach out to me that I'm going to agree with them. I'm not. But I will respectfully listen to you, and I might be convinced, and this is one thing that I am convinced on. Now, what I would love to see going forward, because I know this is a concern of the Board of Supervisors when I had my one-on-ones with them, and I've heard it in newspapers and all their other comments that they say, they are concerned with how this is run as far as, is this daycare, because it does run all day, granted, or is this education? I think we all can agree on this dais that we are in the business of providing an education product. I would like to see this business model shifted where we keep it, but we make it 2 classes a day. We have a morning session, they go home for lunch, they go home for a nap, and then there's an afternoon session. We use the same footprint of classrooms, 4, and we double the number of kids that we can serve, because this is a vital group of kids that we need to serve. And it's the same amount of cost. And this is great. Thank you, Mrs. Anderson, for bringing it up at the 2.9 million. We can shift some things around and make this work. But we need to explore that. This meeting's not long enough, and this budget cycle is not long enough this year to do that. So I'm looking at 26, 27 instead of 25, 26. But if we can shift that business model, if we can make it where it's a little more self-sustainable, we can serve this group of kids and while still being fiscally conscious of the dollar. That's where I'd like to see it go. So in short, keep it this year because we're too far ahead. To pull it this year is going to create a ripple in the system operationally that is going to cause a change management behemoth that all of us are going to have to deal with. But we have time to look at it very closely to perhaps double the capacity for the same amount, if not the same, a close amount of money. No one hold me to this yet. This is penciled out in my head right now, but that's where I would like to see this go.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Klein, and thank you, Mr. Atkins. I want to respond to both of you all, and of course, anyone else that has any questions. So first, with that, absolutely, we'll look into those items. One of the things that we spoke about, but I failed to mention, and we're going to work with the state to talk through that, is VPI has to be full day in order to receive those dollars. So we're going to work with them to see if there's something that we can work out, or whatever students we add on. So we're going to work through those pieces, and we're going to follow up on those things. So thank you for that, and thank you for supporting this program. And Mr. Atkins, we've had many conversations about preschool, and we've had many conversations about the future of preschool. And you know where I stand on that is we do have room for growth. And all those programs that I mentioned to you, all 4 of them, private, Head Start, VPI, not early childhood, because again, we're required to provide that, it is space. And we have a waiting list for each of those programs. So we do have the space and we do have the services to provide. So absolutely, we're more than happy to talk through that a little bit more if that's something the board will support. The other piece that I just want to do a little announcement, as I always do, if any board member or if any board of supervisor wants to come out and see this program any of our 4 schools and rep, I'm more than happy to go with you. I know Mrs. White, I'll volunteer her because I know she loves showing off our kids, and it is very educationally sound. We talk through sometimes nap time can be viewed differently, and I know we like to work through that, but we're more than happy to take you out because it is very educationally sound and it's very structured, and we thrive at that because we are required, and Mrs. White, please correct me if I'm wrong here, we are required to follow a criteria that the state establishes for us, and we get a score. And if we are below a certain score because we're below that educational requirement, we're going to run into a lot of issues. But all of our programs have a very high score, and we like to show off our programs because of the integrity and how much time and effort we put into those programs. But absolutely, we'll look at all those things you mentioned, Mrs. Klein, and I just wanted to throw that offer out there. More than happy to bring you guys along for a visit.
Well, I, for one, I've never changed my stance. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I don't think the government should get any access to our kids sooner than they deserve to. That's my personal opinion. And I've never changed my conservative stance despite what the cabal that runs around telling everybody I'm a criminal and all that stuff is, but that's neither here nor there. But having seen these programs, I am not voting to cut anything as it stands right now. I've been in those classrooms. I've been in there with you. I've seen the benefits of it. So I'm not voting to cut any of it. So that's my personal philosophy on it.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm not going to comment on what Ms. Klein had to say until we actually can dig further into it, but I certainly have plenty of rebuttal for it. I do want to bring to attention a couple of things. First, please invite me to nap time. Second, so at our Board of Supervisors joint meeting we had not too long ago, there was a study that was suggested by one of the supervisors from MIT. And that study was shared with me by another person, a colleague of mine. And that study actually wasn't fully described or shared in that meeting with the Board of Supervisors. So I just encourage folks not to believe or take for granted or take at word what you hear at these meetings. Hold us to task. Research, look up the things that are being said from this microphone, including from myself. Because nothing is worse than just getting a little bit of information and then going online and spouting out like a fool.
Headlines.
So I really, really strongly recommend that you do that. I have the study in front of me. I'm not going to read it to you. It's too many pages. But I also have 3 other studies that were shared with me and the benefits therein for preschool students, which I'm not going to share at this time. But the last thing I'm going to share is that I am so tired of hearing what the Board of Supervisors wants us to do. I'm tired of it. They are not our boss. They are at the same level that our board is. I don't care who's in charge there. I don't care who's in charge here. For the board to ask us if we can prove to them a state looked over program of pre-K is a babysitting operation or if it's actual education, it's insulting. Those people, their job is the budget. Our job is to provide education for our students, to provide services for our students. They don't get to tell us how we run our board. But unfortunately, that's what the common thread is in that Board of Supervisors. I'm tired of it. I was told at one point that if we didn't cut this preschool program and the CEP program, that our budget would be dead on arrival. Well, fine, let it be dead on arrival. They're the ones that can deal with the election. Our job is to take care of these students. And if you didn't know, I'm pissed.
Next.
Okay. So thank you for ECSE, early childhood. So we're moving along here. The next item, which if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chair, I think there was a consensus with adding the 2 additional buses. So that will bring us up from 300,000 to 600,000. I'm going to stop there to see if there's any other questions.
Mr. Chair, just because it's been a while since I piped up and made this request in the budget meeting, and I'm glad I did, and it's for a couple of reasons. I just want to remind everybody who's watching. You may have heard something about this, but we're working on building a new school. Schools need buses. We don't have enough buses, and as Vice Chair Klein reminded us, some of them look like they're from Mad Max. So buses are not, Mr. Shepherd told us, he reminded us, buses are not getting cheaper. And this is a need that we have to start tackling, and the sooner that we do it, the cheaper it will be, because the need is not decreasing. And this is not only a safety requirement, but, this is something that's going to end up saving taxpayers money if we do it sooner rather than later. So that's why I asked for the 4 instead of 2. Yes, I know it costs more money, and no, I don't care.
Thank you, Dr. Erskine. And also, you reminded me to recant what I said earlier. We're not going to see this in the next couple of years to increase the amount of buses, but as our population increases, as we add more schools, that 13 number potentially can go higher. But as of right now, this will get us to that sweet spot of 13. So thank you, Dr. Erskine, for that. See if there's any other questions. Moving on. Oh, here's number 4. Here is the technology piece that was 100,000. We cut that down to 25. We had conversations with
75.
what did I say?
25.
Yeah, I cut it by 25. Thank you, Mrs. Martin.
That's quite a cut.
Yes, my 7s look like 2s. No, so 25,000. We cut that. Okay, so let's dive into CEP. Is that okay, Mr. Bell? Can I go ahead and re-describe CEP? I want to be cognizant of time as Mr. Chair. Is that
You got me
okay?
till midnight, then I turn into a pumpkin.
We won't go that long, I hope.
I'm older than you are.
So let's go ahead and just currently let's talk about our nutrition program, just in general, okay? So in general, before we moved forward with the CEP program, which is about 3 years ago, so let's not even talk about the taboo word of COVID, let's talk back in 2018. So 2018, our nutritional fund was funded from 3 different sources. It was funded from the federal government, it was funded through students purchasing meals, and then there was also local dollars that were put into that fund. So all along, we have been receiving federal dollars when students were the old school way filling out the applications. And if they qualified, we would receive reimbursement dollars from the federal government. Fast forward now to 3 years ago, the CEP program, it's been around for some time, determined that there was additional revenue and federal dollars that school divisions can access if more students were accessing those meals. So with that being said, the CEP program not only qualifies the students that qualify for free and reduced at a specific school, but all the students in that particular school can access a free breakfast and a free lunch. But we get reimbursement dollars for that.
100% reimbursement?
We get not 100%, but we do get reimbursement dollars for that. It's based on a percentage, and it's also based on the percentage of the ISP of that school, which I'll talk about here in a second.
Can we get that percentage?
We've shared it before, and we can share it again. Yeah, so it's based on the different cents, and we can share it again.
I think if I remember correctly from last time when we
Yep.
talked about that, I think it was around 60%. Is that correct?
And that's changed this year.
Yeah, we can definitely get that to you.
Okay.
Yes. So today, it costs us $9.5 million to run our nutritional program. Staffing, buying of materials,
All
buying
schools.
of food. No. Just take CEP out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Take free and reduced out of it. Just costs $9.5 million. We receive between $4 to $6 million from the federal government through reimbursement dollars.
You're talking at just the 9 CEP schools?
I'm talking about where we are today.
Okay. Not all of our schools.
But also,
Wait a minute.
I want to make that clear. It's not all of our schools.
no, it's not. However, at the other 12 schools, we do have students that have filled out the free and reduced application. We also get free and reduced dollars from them as well. Okay? The federal government and the state have all acknowledged that even with the paper pencil filling out the application compared till now, they are reaching more students for the multitude of reasons of students not filling out the application, students being right there at the cusp of meeting the criteria but don't meet it. So there was a multitude of things that this CEP program was able to cover those issues, which we've been talking a lot about.
And we have been
So-
covering those meals before CEP. There has never been a child turned away for a meal in this
Correct,
county,
which we're
ever.
still, correct, and we're still to this day, yes.
Okay.
Now, you know what I always say, I can't speak before I got here, but hopefully not, that wasn't happening. But no, we're not sending kids away if you don't have a meal.
Okay.
Correct,
I agree with that.
yes,
Got it.
yes.
All right.
And that should never happen, ever. So, between 4 to 6, we also have $1 million in our operating fund that we do provide some dollars to this fund. And then we're currently getting about 2.5 million for students who still purchase breakfast and lunch. Okay, just want to make sure we got that right. So with that being said, we have 9 schools, as we just talked about, that met the percentage 2 years ago, which was the 40% mark. The federal government then updated that to say now that schools that are 25% now qualify. So just to rehash what we talked about last year, that's why now all of our schools qualify for that 25%. So that is why we asked to add on those additional schools last year. Fast forward to this year, all 9 of those schools are our neediest schools, and they still qualify both by the 25, and then we're going to talk through the 40% here in a second, which is no longer the requirement, but that was the old percentage that we went off of. A lot of school divisions do participate in this program. We did have a conversation with the state today to talk through the logistics of potentially what would happen if this program did go away, so we did have some really good conversations with them. And then a federal formula does determine what that percentage looks like for each school in regards to reimbursement. So here's the current 9 schools. And there's a couple numbers on here that I want to clarify for everybody. So here's our 9 schools. The left column, and we found this out during COVID as well, because if you recall COVID, everybody had a free breakfast and lunch, but we still have to track that. People weren't just running through the line and just grabbing food and grabbing breakfast. They still had to put their number in, and we were tracking that. We found that not every student, even though it's available, not every student accesses a free breakfast and a free lunch because they have other means to eat. So at these schools, lunch participation is that first column, breakfast participation is the second column, and then the free and reduced percentage there is the third column. Now, we received a really, really good question, and I want to answer this question if they're listening. We were asked, how do we know the free and reduced percentage if those students no longer fill out the application, right? Because CEP is CEP, everybody qualifies. So our DSS department still tracks those numbers through different means. So based on different aspects of services for kids, Medicaid, SNAP benefits, so they still track that, so we get that number directly from them. So we still track that percentage and that number. The other question that we received is, let's just take a look at Apple Pie Ridge. So we have 46% of those students are free and reduced, but 70% are participating in lunch. So don't get dismayed by that, because again, we are feeding kids, and we, as Mrs. Klein said, we don't want to turn any kid away, but the higher the percentage is, the more reimbursement dollars we receive.
The
And-
higher the participation?
Correct,
Okay, so let me make sure I have this straight.
correct.
70% of, how many students do we have at Apple Pie Ridge right now?
400, I don't know if someone can pull
400?
that up real quick.
Can we make it 400?
400, we'll do 400 lack of argument,
400,
yeah.
so the math is easy?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have 400 students at Apple Pie Ridge, so 70% of those 400 students are eating lunch.
Correct.
In one way or another.
Correct.
Whether they are under the federal free and reduced lunch program, bravo, that's great, love it, CEP, or their parents are paying.
Correct. Well, at Apple Pie Ridge, remember, these are the schools that currently participate. So
Right.
no parent would pie a breakfast or a lunch, they're automatically.
I'm with you now. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So 70% of all those kids, of that 400, are eating lunch?
Correct.
Okay.
And the
Got
reason
it.
I shared that is if the school was not under CEP, only 46% of those students would have access to a free and reduced lunch. Does that make sense?
Because they're, yeah.
Are you saying that 30% of the students at Apple Pie Ridge bring their own lunch?
Correct, or have other means of eating, yes, ma'am. Parents bring them lunch, parents bring them food, what have you, yes.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
You're saying that, you just said 70% get a free or reduced lunch when, but that's 100%. 100% have access to it.
They do, but only 70% are participating.
70% are.
Right, because remember, that was a question we received last year, was there was a big misnomer that they thought we were making 14,000 lunches, and then whatever people didn't eat, we were throwing away. That's not how our cafeterias work.
Right.
They have a formula, right,
Yep.
right.
Yeah, and based upon, numbers from the previous months and whatever we're
Correct.
doing the ordering. And, a lot of kids might like pizza day, but they don't like chicken and broccoli day.
There you go. There you
I
go.
get that. So I guess for me, here's the numbers I care about, right? One is no kids are going hungry no matter what we do. So whether we pick it up through CEP or through debt services, am I correct in saying we are not turning away? And I think we have a commitment up here on this board that we're not turning away any students. We're not letting anybody go hungry. We're not giving them a cheese sandwich and a warm glass of milk either.
That is
They're
my
getting the
commitment
same-
as well, yes.
They're getting the same food as everybody else.
Correct.
And, with them popping in their numbers and you can't tell the difference between one student getting free or reduced lunch, they forgot their lunch money that day, they didn't put money on their account, or any other scenario. So everybody looks equal. There's equality there, right? Across the board.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there's those two numbers. Here's the next set of numbers. How much does this cost the local taxpayer versus how much does it cost to put it under debt services?
So that's the next slide. So I'll dive into that.
Trying to
Let me
segue
go-
you.
I want to
Yep.
back up to this one just to clarify something. So I am in agreement that in all of our schools, we are not turning away students. That is different than students going hungry. We don't know that data or have that information. We don't know how they're feeling. That's data that we can't capture.
It's the same lunch. You don't get
No.
You don't get
It's-
more full from the same slice of
No,
pizza
no.
versus the next slice of pizza. It's still one
No,
slice.
you're absolutely right. I think you're misunderstanding. I'm talking about those students who don't qualify. So I see this in three pieces. You've got those students whose families can afford to purchase lunch. And yes, will there be some of them that take advantage of the free lunch? Absolutely. You know, what that number is, we can't really know.
It's 100% of people that want it.
But didn't we just say that we
No,
feed
let me-
everybody?
Let me finish. So then you've got this second group of there's the second group of students that qualify for free and reduced lunches. And so that's the government program that they get. So they get a free or reduced lunch that they either pay for or get for free. This is not in CEP. This is just in our schools in general.
Correct.
But then, and I'm a civics teacher, so I teach this to my students. There's still a group of people who, number one, don't qualify for the government programs, but they don't have enough to pay for these lunches and aren't necessarily participating in going up to the lunch line. Instead, they bring whatever snack food they may have from home, or they rely on their friends to pilfer food from them. Pilfer's a bad word, sorry. To get food from them. But there's a group of people that are sort of lost in this. And that's the piece I think that we're not completely understanding. Or if we do, we don't believe it. Which, believe it, they exist. There are people in our county and in our country who can't afford the free and reduced, don't reach the criteria of income to be eligible for the free and reduced, can't afford to pay for a full-price lunch, and in some cases, in many cases, from what I've seen, they don't go through the line, and they don't get their lunch. So I'm concerned about that group of people.
Well-
I'm concerned about all of them, honestly, but that group of people.
Ms. Martin had a comment. We keep stepping on her. I thought you did, maybe not.
What?
No, I didn't step on her.
No, you didn't, you didn't. You didn't.
Let her speak.
No, it's just that I understand what you're saying, but we can't always take care of every single individual, especially if they're not willing to come up and tell us what's going wrong.
Why not?
if they're not willing to tell us what's wrong, we can't help them.
Sure we can.
No, we can't.
Walk them through.
You,
we
yeah, you
force
can't
them through the
force
lunch
a
line.
feeding tube down somebody's throat and pump,
Nope, you can't.
hard water.
But you can pay for their lunch and their breakfast every day.
100%, and we
Already
are
do.
still doing that.
We already do.
But we're
and
not
never
if they
have.
aren't going through it.
Well, we can't force them through
You
the
can't
lunch line.
force them to go into a lunch line.
It's not about forcing them.
You're telling us that we need to force everybody to eat
No.
so that we can ensure everybody doesn't go hungry.
What I'm saying
well,
is-
we're saying that we're paying for everybody's meal. If you,
But
you can lead. Hold on, I'm going to finish. It's my time now. We can lead a horse to water, can't get it to drink, right? That's the old saying, right? I can go out there and I can provide every dollar out there to ensure that these kids will eat. I think we have that commitment from the board. We're saying it publicly. We have that same commitment from our superintendent. Kids are not going to go hungry if they go get in line. I don't know how do you plan on like making sure that they walk through the line before being able to go grab a seat? Because they all go to lunchtime. I mean, we can do that and say that they have to walk through the line before they go take a seat. Would that make you feel better on that?
Mr. Chairman, but it could be okay just to ask Mr. Bell, because I want to make sure I'm understanding and that I'm not, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. If Johnny doesn't want to get up or doesn't want to, or doesn't, whatever the reason is, and doesn't go through the line, but food's available to Johnny without having to pay for the food. Like Johnny would be able to pop up there, put his 4-digit PIN in, and be handed a lunch tray. I think I might be misunderstanding what the deficit is.
So
And I'm
if-
sorry.
No, it's fine, and maybe I'm not explaining it clearly. If the world was black and white, then yes, you would all be correct. However, it's not. There are other issues at play. There's pride, there's ego, there's any of a number of things. You know, there are some families that don't want their child to go through the lunch line if they can't afford it. There are people who just, there are some students who just won't go up. But I dare say that if you provide, if everybody knows that the lunch is free and the breakfasts are free, then anyone and everyone who needs it or wants it will be able to go through the line, and that will be one less hardship that they have to pay for. Now, if we were Loudoun County, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and I wouldn't be fighting for CEP. If we were Fairfax County, same thing. But I see this in Clark County where I teach. I see this here. It's in Shenandoah County. It's in Warren County. It's in the poorer counties within our state that we see this. Now, we're just going to disagree on this. I know that. And I still say that it has, unfortunately, some political ramifications or political attachments to it, and that's fine. But I can't consciously remove a school who's getting free lunch from the county or from the CEP just because it's going to save a couple of bucks. And I think in the next slide that Dr. Hummer's going to show us, he's going to show us that not only will it not save a couple of bucks, that it may end up costing us more if we remove any of these schools from the rolls. Now, the federal government, or is it the state? I'm not sure. I guess
It's federal, it's federal.
it's federal. So they changed the 40% to 25%, not
20.
just because they decided, oh, let's just lower it for the heck of it. They changed it because they see that there's a real need. There's a gap in the number of people that are being able to take advantage of this that aren't meeting that criteria at 40%. They needed to lower it to 25% so those additional people could eat lunch and eat breakfast consistently every day. And this would increase attendance. It would increase in participation. Our test scores would go up, and it would provide them with a consistent meal each and every day, well, for at least 5 days a week anyway, because when they go home, they may not have that.
You can't prove that people will even go up to eat, and you're telling me that it's going to improve a test score? We just talked about this. You can't.
I don't need to prove it. There have been countless studies that have proven it.
But you can't prove that you can make somebody go up. You can't spit facts on one spot and then not on the other. It has to
don't
be
think
opinion
that
across the board, or it has to be conjecture across the board.
I'm not sure I follow.
Here's where I am not following, and this is the problem that I have with CEP. we already cover our students 100%. We have, ever since I graduated Shranda at 2000.
We don't
There were
need
ki-
CEP.
We have been doing this out of our own pocket, out of the own local pocket, for as long as I can remember. So the problem I have with this is we can cover it in the debt service fund for a fraction of the cost that we can cover, that we implement this program. So back last year when we were looking at implementing this throughout all 21 facilities, there, in that $1.1 million ask, there was $300,000 in extra administrative fees, and then the rest of it went to prepackaged, if I remember the slide correctly, it was packaging for the food, it was stands to put the food out. Like this, it's more cost to it. Whereas if we just use the systems we already have in place, we have it covered by the debt service fund. I have no problem paying debt for kids to eat. Absolutely none. I can justify that all day long. But I do have a problem implementing a plan or continuing one that's in place that has administrative bloat to it, and this one does, when we already have covered forever breakfast and lunch for kids who need it. All they have to do is go and get it. This is nothing new. This is a redundant program, and additionally, our local cost index is going up. We're getting richer as a community. I know some of us see it and some of us don't. I could argue it both ways. We are getting richer as a community, so how can we say we're getting richer as a community and that means less money from the state and more money coming out of our local coffers after we have just asked for a 4th high school and 2 expansions, and we're about to ask for a hefty pay raise for our teachers? We need to be cognizant of that. And this is something that's a redundant expenditure. This is why I am very adamant about this one. Now, it's my understanding, if we pull it in total from these 9 schools, it's going to create an administrative change management behemoth for you. Is that correct?
Can I go to the next slide
Yes.
real quick? Before I do that, just so we're all on the same page, I want to talk through that ISP number again. It's identified student percentage. There's other things that are factored into that, such as the type of student. There's other points that are attributed to that. So that's why you see a little difference with that number there, and we calculate that. And these were numbers for this year, and we've recalculated those for next year. So I just want to make sure that you are aware of that. So of these schools here, only one school would not be at that 40% number. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
So just one school now?
So of these 9, only one school would be below 40%. But remember, that cutoff is 25.
Oh, I know.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. So here is the 2 proposals that are up for consideration. The original needs-based budget proposal, which is my proposal, is the $100,000 added into the debt service fund because that number continues to climb. Or if the board wanted to cut the CEP program at the 9 schools, as you can see, it would only be a $200,000 savings. So because of the amount of money that we get from the federal government. So yes, there would be additional administrative costs because then we would have to go back to each of these schools, track down applications, have students to fill those out, because if we remove CEP from these schools, we get accounted for only the students that fill out the application for federal dollars. If we keep the 9 schools, you don't have to fill out the application. If you go through the lunch line and get a lunch or a breakfast, we get reimbursed for that.
So question about this. So I'm seeing your administrative cost. I get it. How much? Let's throw this option out the window for one moment, and let's say that we flip the switch on CEP for all 21's facilities. Would we save the division money? Can we prove that? Because if we can prove that, CEP all day long for everybody. If it saves this division and this locality money, absolutely, but I am not seeing that,
Well,
Dr. Hummer, in those numbers.
Well, again, that we wouldn't be able to calculate that, and we talked about that, talked to Mrs. Anderson about.
How could we calculate it?
If we were to take a look at a school and remove the CEP, potentially, but again, that's going to be hard because I don't want to put the students at the cost of us trying to figure out what that cost savings is going to be. That's why I was sharing with you earlier. Because right now we get $4 to $6 million from federal reimbursements. We get about 2.5 million from students paying for lunches, and we put a million in from local dollars. What we don't know is, say, for example, let's go back to Apple Pie Ridge. Say if we say Apple Pie Ridge, we're not going to do CEP. Is the dollars that now we're going to get for students paying make up for the federal dollars we are not going to receive, we're not going to be able to know that. And that's why we will have to determine what that's going to look like, because if it doesn't, then we're going to do what you all are trying to avoid. That means it's going to increase the amount of money that we're putting in locally. So we're not going to know what that dollar figure is. And right now it's 2.5. You could divide that by 12 to get an average, but we're not going to know what that's going to look like. But if we wanted to try that, that is something that we could do. But again, we're not going to know what that number is until we did that.
I'm not the numbers person that these folks are, and I'm not even going to try and admit that I am. But as I understood it after talking to you, if we cut the CEP, it's not going to save us any money. Is that correct?
$200,000,
It's pretty much gonna be a
but it's
wash,
going to be
right?
pretty much, yes.
And it's in essence going to cost us some money somewhere because of the added things that we're going to have to do, the added staff, such as at Dow J. Howard. So
Correct.
if we cut it, it's going to end up increasing us locally. As I
Essentially, and that's
understood
what
it,
we've,
right?
and Mrs. Anderson, if you can chime in on that.
It
please.
has the potential to cost us more, yes.
May I ask how? Exactly how is it going to cost us more when we're feeding the same students, same meals? How's it going to cost us more?
We're
You're
going
not
to get the federal
paying.
reimbursement.
So we won't get the federal reimbursement.
Right.
But also, right now, when we're at Dow J, we don't have a full-time person collecting money because everybody is able to eat for free there. So we would have to provide another staff member there to work with collecting money while the food is being served.
On top of which, there would be more students that would not be paying, so the debt service would go higher as well.
We would have to have that conversation.
But they're
yes.
not paying at Dow J. Howard. That's
I'm
No,
talking
no.
about the
That-
other.
that's the
I'm talking
example
about the-
that he used.
I'm talking about the other 8 schools.
And so what if we just keep Dow J. Howard as free for everybody?
That would be, for you guys to
Then you wouldn't
decide.
have that expense.
It's still going to incur costs across the board
And
if
what-
we take it away from the other schools, as I understand it. Correct?
I want to see those numbers. I understand that as well, but I don't, how can we, I'm having a very hard time wrapping my head around why we can't have why I can't see numbers for this, because we spent a lot, clearly the board before us, so not our show at the time, thought that this was a good idea. And I would like to think that they were fiscally responsible and that it would save the division money. I can see the argument here where it could potentially save, but I need to see those numbers. You're talking about we don't currently have a staff member there. Okay, great, because kids can grab and go. So you're going to save on administrative costs. You're going to save on point of sale. So instead of having a point of sale, they just grab and go. I could see potential for that. Show me that. Show me that it's going to save the division money. Show me that it's going to not only save money and it's going to cancel out the debt service. Kill two birds with one stone, and I am all about it. I can't see that right now.
The biggest way that it's going to save us, you're right, and we talked about that. That's something that we would not know what that exact operational dollar would be because we've relied on those federal dollars as well as the additional dollars we're getting from the other schools paying. Where it is going to potentially be a significant impact on the budget, and it's potentially is, again, I'm going to go back to if more students are adding into the 2.5 because they're paying, is that going to offset the less federal dollars we're going to receive? And we're getting $6 million from federal. So I find that very hard to believe that with these students buying, is it going to offset that $6 million? We'll still get federal dollars, but right now, with that percentage, we're getting 80% of return on those students at James Wood Middle School. Whereas if they were not CEP, we would only get 45%, and that's if they filled out the application.
Here's what I would like to see. So right now, there's not enough data to say cut it all. For me, for this board member, I don't have enough data to say cut it, and I don't have enough data to say keep it. So I have no data. What I want to see for next year, I would like to look at this in two ways. One, I want to see what it would look like for all 21 schools if we implemented it. I saw it last year.
Sure.
I want to see the savings. I want to see these savings that we keep talking about. If it is a net zero for the division, I'm all in. If it's fully reimbursed, I'm all about it. Because I keep hearing, this is a savings, this is a savings. I'm not seeing the savings. Now, what I am seeing is if we pull something that's already, a program that's already in place, it has the potential to cost us, and I understand that, even though we don't have the exact numbers.
Yeah, Ms. Klein, can I share something really quick?
Yes.
So I think I think we need to better define what it is the board is wanting to do, because there's two different things here. It is going to cost us money to feed students. If we're looking at a zero balance for putting money into this, that's where that's not going to happen. The savings is right, and I just want to be clear on that, because it's never going to get to a point where there's zero money going in from the locality, because there's a bunch of things that we have to get ahead of. Because if we remove students buying, we have to buy food and we have to buy materials, and then there's also, again, fully transparent, there might be some more staff based on the percentage there. So at the end, it's not going to be a wash, and that $1 million goes down to zero from the locality. But when you take a look at the larger picture, it is going to be more money that we get from the federal government versus what we did by just having students pay, because of the issue of not every student filling out the application, which is an issue. And that was one of the things that we talked to the state about today, and Ms. Anderson, please chime in, was that is a statewide and nationwide issue of the multitude of reasons that those applications aren't completed. And when you don't complete them, that's when we don't get the money back. So that was part of the reason that the CEP was formed, because there was recognized that more students would need to access these free breakfasts and free lunches. Because again, this is a federal program. You know, that this is across the country.
It's
that
a
folks
federal
are
locality with a locality
match.
match.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So,
Go ahead. Go.
I 100% agree with what Ms. Klein's saying. I need to see those numbers. But I disagree with her timeline. And the reason I disagree with her timeline is, what if, because they've already said it, and I know Mr. Bell doesn't like it, but what if the Board of Supervisors says, nope, figure out where to go, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. So I would like to see those numbers if the Board of Supervisors kicks us back.
What numbers exactly, Mr. Atkins? I want to make sure I'm clear.
Where we would be cost saving if we stuck with CEP versus if we got rid of it. I'm still under the impression that we might not get 100% of that. Like, you go back to apple pie, you got 70% of the student feeding, 46% of them would qualify for the free and reduced lunch. I don't see.
So right now, the
Not
answer
applying.
to that. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I think right now, though, if they do ask that question, regardless of where you all vote on this tonight, $200,000 is the savings. If we were to remove all CEP, $200,000 is that savings. Because again, the whole intent of this program is to feed kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's the service we're trying to meet. The whole point of this program isn't to save money, which I know is what we have to talk about in the grand scheme of things. So that's not the intent of this. The intent is there would be a $200,000 savings, and then if we were to cut all 9 schools, that's where we would have to determine what less federal dollars we're getting, how much it would make it up in regards to students that were paying. Hopefully, all the students in that third column there fill out those applications, and then we would have to see, do we need to continue to add money into the locality?
So right now, if we voted no on it tonight, we would save $200,000, and we would still be able to feed all of our students.
Right.
But again, you tell me that you're saying 200,000, but then the other day when I discussed it, you said that 200,000 was not.
There potentially would be a wash. We would also have to have a conversation, because now we are adding on 9 schools that are going to accrue debt. So we would have to add money on to the $100,000 that we requested.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that I've just kind of been mulling over in my head, and I know you can't do this on the spot, so please don't think I'm asking this, but I do think it's worth us looking at, especially if we're going to answer some of these deeper probing questions about the data. I want to see a pre-CEP year, maybe an average of a few, maybe the most timely before CEP started. What was the debt service on meals that year? What were the free and reduced? I mean, this is a program that was literally signed into law by Harry Truman. This should not be something that we have to reinvent. I don't want any of our kids to not eat if they're hungry, and I'm glad that the seven of us continue to be on the same page of that. I think that it's probably ripe for future discussion. If we're trying to compare apples and apples and not apples and Buicks, that would be helpful for me.
Let me just clarify what you're asking. So you're asking for what was our debt service in 2018 or the year before we implemented this? How
Well, that would be
much?
COVID, so we would have to go back a
Okay,
couple
yeah,
more years. That's why I said
specific
earlier
years.
about 2018 was a
Right.
year we threw out. And Ms. Anderson and I were talking about this earlier today, so we can definitely put that together.
Yeah, so what was the school meal debt then before this? And then how does that compare now?
And the participation rate.
And I realize that our enrollment has also gone up, so that can be factored in as a
Proportionate,
variable,
yeah.
proportional.
And factor in the hiring of additional staff.
In the higher, yeah. How many additional staff have we added with CEP since we implemented it?
Dr. Hummer, if I may, if I could add, we're on track probably for approximately $400,000 meal debt this year. That's with 9 CEP schools.
So-
Hold up. $400,000 when we were covering it with debt service at 125 before, or 150 before?
No, we were at
We're currently,
250, 300, what were we at before?
I think
We
it was about-
increased it last year.
I
What
think
is
it's
it?
about 250, but
Yeah.
right now we're 200-ish. Okay, 162 now, so, but we were projecting if that continues, because it is growing, it could be between 350 and 400,000.
So it sounds like we
It's not there
need
yet.
solid numbers, because we're getting
I'm sorry.
400,000, 162. It just sounds like we're everywhere right now. I'd like to see
I'm
those
not
hard numbers.
everywhere. I'm taking the numbers and I'm projecting where it is, Mr. Atkins. That's where we are if we just double that.
But that's a guess, correct?
Because
Well,
right
until the
now,
meals
what?
are
No,
bought,
I
yes.
get
Yeah.
I get where you're going.
Yeah,
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
162 doubled is just over 300. But
Over 320, right?
Yeah.
Based on the rate we're going.
So we're basically looking at higher debt than what we had last year.
That's the rate we're going, yes, sir.
And the 3 schools that dropped below 40% are now next year going to only be 1 school, correct?
Based on however you guys vote, yes.
Well, no, but I mean, the projection for next year is that only 1 school will be below 40%.
Oh, correct, yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And I do believe that parts of Frederick County are becoming wealthier, but clearly not the entire county. And it's that part that I think we need to really consider. The other thing we need to consider is back to the Board of Supervisors. If they want to reject this, let them. I mean, that's their problem. If we see a real need for this, and the only thing we're going to save is $200,000 versus taking food from students, which I know we don't believe that we're doing, but that's still going to be the perception. And there may be instances where some students don't get what they need. And I'm not saying it's going to be a lot, but we don't know that information. I don't see any reason why we should remove any of these 9 schools from the CEP, because I think it's only going to give us a bigger headache. It's not going to save us a whole lot of money, if any. And we're providing a service for these students that our own state government would love to do themselves. So that's where I am.
So here's where I am. I need to see those numbers. However, I understand too that we have a timeline on this budget. Now, if I understand everything correctly, second year as finance committee chair, so still have some learning to do.
Yes, ma'am.
However, if we approve this budget tonight,
And it's adopting.
it's adopting,
Adopting,
excuse
yep,
me. If
mhm.
we adopt the budget, the Board of Supervisors approves it, then it still comes back to us as to how we want to allocate the tranche of funds that they give us.
That is
that
correct, just as long as we don't go above the appropriation,
As long
yes,
as we
ma'am.
don't go above the appropriation.
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
So, Mrs. Anderson, if you and your team, as if you don't have anything else to do, if you could get us those pre-COVID numbers adjusted for all of the deltas that we talked about, whether it's population, whether it's personnel added, as Mr. Atkins.
Sure.
I would love to see those so that we can make a better educated decision on this. Because I don't think we have enough information tonight to make that decision. The Board of Supervisors may make it for us, but we don't know that. But it's something that I'd like to look at once we get it back and see where we can reallocate.
Absolutely. We can get
Because-
that for you.
As was very well published by Molly in the paper, my primary goal is to get our teachers paid and get them recruited, to get them here so that we can staff a fourth high school as well as all the growth that we're seeing.
important.
So,
Thank you, Mrs. Klein.
$200,000 would go a long way to getting
I
more
know.
teachers.
I know,
Yeah,
I hear you.
so,
And that will be a very big discussion point once.
yeah, I
get
mean,
it
we
back.
talk about it's only $200,000, but man.
It's a lot of money.
I know there's a lot of
It's a
people
lot
out
of
there who use $200,000.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else with CEP?
Tons.
Okay. I know this is not an item that is necessarily explicitly being impacted, but it is going to be impacted based on the items you've added on. But I also want to draw your attention to the state. As I've mentioned to you all, we are looking really good at the state level based on preliminary projections, preliminary, so it can change, is we're looking at about a $3 million increase. Now, I want to make sure, the reason I want to highlight that is, one, we're happy about that, so the state is providing additional funds for public education, which is fantastic, but also, two, because we respect the local taxpayers, that we don't go now to 11 million for the state and keep the county at 9. We will reduce the county if we get additional money from the state. Want to be very clear on that. So based on where this is right now, if we did get additional 3 million from the state, we would subtract that from the county, so that would now go down to 6.7 as the request, or whatever money they do provide us. So I just want to make sure that we highlight that. This does not include the 866, correct? Want to make sure.
That is correct.
Yep. So based on how you all vote this evening, that number potentially will go up to 10.5. And we'll, of course, put the rest of the money in there because that does matter. All right. So with that being said, Mr. Chair, we have gone through each of these items. If I'm understanding correctly, just to kind of help with next steps, and I'll come back here on the dais with you all, is that 2 through 5, I think we're moving forward with as is, but then number 1, you all will have to decide which number you want to go with, and I'll put it back up here so you guys can talk through that. And then we do have motions there in front of you for once we decide which scale to move forward with. Hold on one second here. There we go. Sorry about that.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Atkins.
When we go through these votes tonight on adopting, can we do roll call votes, starting with
Certainly.
down on this end?
Certainly.
Thank you. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to propose, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board adopt the superintendent's originally proposed FY26 budget.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the budget as originally presented has been properly seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just with the original budget, we did discuss the adjustments with the adding 4 bus replacements versus 2, because the original budget had 2. So now it's my understanding the board wants to move forward with 4. Additionally, there's a reduction in the technology replacement cost of 100,000 to
I'll
75,000.
I'll rescind my motion and I'll adjust it.
There
I'll
was-
rescind my second.
You can't do that. We gotta get it voted down and I'll redo it.
Yeah.
All right.
So we need an amended,
No, we need to.
No, we
vote.
need to vote that down and
Oh,
then,
okay.
and so if, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Or Mr. Atkins?
No.
Okay. Dr. Erskine?
No.
Mrs. Klein?
No.
Mr. Sturdivant?
no.
Mr. Bell?
No.
Mr. Funes? No. Ms. Martin?
No.
Gotcha.
That was easy.
All right.
Now, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I move the board adopt the superintendent's originally proposed FY26 budget with 2 amendments. One, it would be for 4 school bus replacements and $75,000 adjusted from the $100,000 on the technology refresh cycle.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt with the
Second.
recommend, okay, it has been seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair, just so everybody is clear, that is the first column. Just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Okay, hearing no discussion, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Atkins,
Aye.
Dr. Erskine,
Aye.
Mrs. Klein,
Aye.
Mr. Sturdivant,
Aye.
Mr. Bell,
Aye.
Mr. Funes. Aye. Ms. Martin.
Aye.
That motion passes.
So now we have a proposed budget.
Yippee.
Whee!
Okay. I'm sorry? All right, so that solves that issue for now. Are there any board member comments for this evening?
Mr. Chair, I have board member comment.
Ms. Klein, please.
Thank you. So part of what I've learned about being on this board is there's a difference between consensus and agreement. So we've reached consensus tonight. I am still a very huge proponent of pay scale option F, and that declusters at 5 years and declusters at the 13, 14, 15, and 16 year. That is an additional cost. I understand that. However, as I've made very clear, that is a priority for me to get our teachers paid and get good ones recruited here. So just putting that out into the ether, and just to reiterate to the public too, we have adopted this budget. It still needs to be allocated to different things that we are passionate about. And I think it's been clear tonight that several of us have some passions, and several of us need some data to make some data-based decisions. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bell.
First, thank you everyone for coming out. I think this is the most well-attended work session we've ever had. I'm so glad to see you, and please continue to come out, ask us questions, send us emails, make phone calls. It's far better than social media. The other thing I would like to say is to thank all of my fellow board members. I think that while we can be up here and disagree with one another and be passionate or seek data, we can certainly agree that we work together and that we're also working together for the same cause, which is our students. And I have to say that sitting on this board, there have been a lot of things that have been said by the public. There have been a lot of things that have been said about us or against us. But I will say that for the most part, we work well together. And I really appreciate that I have people here that will listen to my ideas, listen to my opinions, as well as me listening to their ideas and to their opinions. So I want to say thank you to everyone here for that respect. And I also want to thank Dr. Hummer and his team for putting together an incredibly comprehensive, wonderful budget that now lies in the hands of the Board of Supervisors as to whether to approve the total dollar amount or not. And it's their decision to do so. But again, I will reiterate, we are not beholden to their board. We are our own board, and we are made up of professionals. Dr. Hummer and his team are professionals. They are a staff of professionals. They do their job well, they care about their job, and they care about the students that they're serving. So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Hummer. Thank you to Dr. Hummer's staff. And Nina does all right, too. So thank you, Nina.
Thanks.
With that, I relinquish the microphone.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So first, I owe Miles an apology. It was actually a mutual high five on that bus increase from 2 to 4. So I don't want to hog that from him. That's something we both feel strongly about. Plus, Mr. Shepard's a rock star. So the second thing, this is a needs-based budget proposal. There are a lot of different ways that you can go about budgeting, especially in a school system our size. I would love to be able to send downtown a wish list of everything that the 7 of us think that we should or should be doing, and without the things we shouldn't. That is not the way that we budget here. The community has told us pretty overwhelmingly, if you look at the makeup of this board, that they have an expectation of fiscal conservative type policies. It's pretty clear. At the same time, the feedback that we got this week from constituents is that these would not have been the right cuts at the right time. And so I want to try to share one other piece of this that's been frustrating for me as the new member of the board, is that I really love these public meeting laws a lot. And they make it almost impossible for us to even have basic deliberations about policy when we're not sitting up here together. This is the first time that the seven of us have been able to have a group conversation about these policy points because we can't be in a room together without a public meeting. We can't even correspond with each other more than one-on-one without 17 different forms being filled out and something being tacked on the courthouse steps. That's something I'm going to be writing to my legislator about, because it went from helpful to ridiculous. So I appreciate, like Mr. Bell said, the ability to actually work through some of these items where we disagree, but we're not disagreeable with each other. I think that we are doing the right thing by kids and by taxpayers. And I'm looking forward to productive conversations going forward.
I'm good. I know, I usually talk.
Oh, hallelujah.
I just got to go to work.
Anyone else?
I have one last, or do you have?
Well,
go.
Yeah, from this point on out, one of the things that I ran for, okay, in my own particular being, was I want to see this county step up their educational system. I want to see us to get out of the things that don't concern students' well-being as far as becoming a better citizen and a better person and more well-educated and able to establish themselves once they leave. And it's not totally being done. There's too much interference with state and federal and so forth and so on. And a lot of it has to do with money. And that's, while we need it, don't get me wrong, I know. We all need money. But we need to focus a lot more on education. And some of that might have to change from what it used to be. But at the same time, there's some basis and basic things that need to be provided to all students. And I want to see it done.
Any other comments? Our next school board meeting will be on March 18th, 2025. I am listening for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bell.
I would like to make a motion that we continue, no, that's not right. I would like to make a motion that we end our current board meeting.
Second.
You would like to?
Adjourn.
Thank you. It has been motioned to adjourn and has been properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.